Dust motes danced in the faint grey light filtering through boarded-up windows. The air hung heavy, thick with the stench of decay and despair. A single room, cluttered with the remnants of a forgotten world, formed the last bastion of humanity. Here, amidst the ruins of civilization, resided its final, desperate hope. John, his eyes hollow and haunted, clutched a rusty pipe, his only solace in this desolate world. He had not seen another human in years. The silence outside was a chilling testament to their absence. Only the scuttling and scratching sounds that echoed from beyond the barricaded door served as a constant reminder of the horrors that now ruled the earth. These were not the sounds of animals driven mad by hunger. These were the sounds of something else, something grotesque and hungry, with an insatiable appetite for flesh. John remembered the day the world ended. He remembered the panic, the screams, the desperate struggle for survival. He had barricaded himself in this room, a fortress against the encroaching darkness. His supplies had long since dwindled, forcing him to scavenge for scraps, his heart pounding with terror with every foray outside his sanctuary. But fate, it seemed, had other plans for him, a twisted, cruel jest that offered a glimmer of hope amidst the abyss. In the darkest corner of his room, amidst the scattered debris, lay salvation. A salvation far more terrifying than the death he so desperately sought to avoid. It had started as a pulsating mass, a grotesque blob of flesh and bone. It emitted a low, guttural hum, a sound that sent shivers down his spine. John, initially repulsed, had been ready to end it all. But then the creature, if it could be called that, had offered him a choice. It offered him sustenance, a foul-smelling, viscous liquid that oozed from its depths. It was an agonizing decision, a pact with a nightmare. Starvation, however, is a powerful motivator. The first taste was revolting, the taste of rot and decay lingering on his tongue. But it kept him alive, and so began their morbid symbiosis. The creature, seemingly nourished by the scraps John risked his life to find, grew larger each day. It began to take a more defined shape, albeit a grotesquely distorted one. Its flesh, once a homogeneous mass, started to differentiate. Bones protruded at odd angles, covered in a sickly, translucent skin. Despite the creature's horrifying appearance, John found a perverse comfort in its presence. It was a living being in a world that had seemingly abandoned life. Its warmth, the rhythmic pulsing of its form, offered a semblance of companionship in the face of overwhelming loneliness. But this comfort was a fleeting illusion, soon to be shattered by the creature's terrifying evolution. The creature's growth was not merely physical, it was evolving, becoming more complex with each passing day. The pulsating hum had transformed into a series of clicks and hisses, an alien language that John couldn't decipher. The stench, once bearable, grew unbearable, permeating the room with the odour of putrefaction. Then the nightmares began, vivid, grotesque dreams that bled into his waking hours. He saw flashes of unimaginable creatures, heard the screams of 1,000 souls devoured. His sanctuary, once a refuge, had transformed into a prison of fear. He knew with a chilling certainty that the creature was the source of these nightmares. It was invading his mind, twisting his thoughts, pulling him into its own twisted reality. Fear turned to paranoia. John began talking to himself, muttering incoherent prayers to a god he no longer believed in. He saw movement in the shadows, heard whispers in the clicking of the creature. His grasp on reality, already tenuous, began to slip. The creature, no longer content with its corner, began to move. It lumbered around the room, its flesh scraping against the walls, leaving a trail of viscous slime in its wake. John, his body racked with fear, could only cower in the corner, his eyes wide with terror, watching as the creature he had invited into his life transformed into his worst nightmare. The clicking stopped. John looked up, his heart pounding in his chest. The creature stood before him, its grotesque form filling his vision. Two black pits, devoid of pupils, stared back at him. Then it spoke, not with clicks or hisses, but with his own voice echoing inside his head. "We are one now," the voice whispered, cold and sharp like shards of ice. "Our minds, our bodies intertwined. You cannot escape me." John recoiled in horror, his mind rebelling against the intrusion. He tried to scream, but no sound escaped his lips. The creature's thoughts flooded his mind, a torrent of alien sensations, of hunger, of an insatiable desire to consume. He saw through its senses, experienced the world as a grotesque symphony of smells and sounds, a world stripped of beauty, of hope. He understood then. The creature had not merely been evolving physically, it had been feeding on his memories, his emotions, his very essence. It was becoming him, and there was no escape. He was trapped, bound to this abomination until his dying breath. As the creature's thoughts overwhelmed his own, a single terrifying realization dawned upon him. Humanity, in its final moments, had not been extinguished by the horrors outside. It had destroyed itself from within, consumed by its own desperation. The last sanctuary had become the tomb of mankind, a grim monument to its hubris.